Black people in the United States are at the highest risk for cancer death. The root issues include disparities in health care, exposure to risk factors, and underrepresentation in research and clinical trials. Jessica Matthews is currently battling a rare cancer typically found in younger Black people at a late stage with bleak survival rates. More research is needed to improve treatment, and while focused on saving her own life, she's also intent on helping to save future generations. Treated with the strongest form of chemotherapy.
My entire life, I've always had long, thick, heavy hair.
Attacking Jessica Matthews' body is one of the deadliest kidney cancers.
This is another chapter in this journey.
Diagnosed with renal medullary carcinoma in October of 2024, for months, what she saw in the mirror wasn't someone with the disease. But now,
it feels so real now because my appearance is changing.
According to MD Anderson Cancer Center, less than 1% of kidney cancers are diagnosed as renal medullary carcinoma, and few patients survive more than 2 years.
I've been preparing my two youngest sons, who are 11 and 8.
Preparing them for how mom will look, not for the outcome doctors predict.
Even though my cancer is a very rare, aggressive cancer it's only small studies been done on it, I want to survive it. I'll be a survivor.
It tends to affect a higher proportion of the African American community.
Dr. Bhavana Chapman, a radiation oncologist with Cancer Specialists of North Florida, explains research and clinical trials are underway to improve care for patients such as Matthews, but representation matters.
A lot of the clinical trials they don't represent the diverse population that we see in the actual community, especially among cancers that disproportionately affect certain races.
Black people are more likely to develop RMC because the sickle cell trait is most common in this group. Matthews does not carry that trait. She is among a group of people whose bodies historically have been abused for medical advancement, leading to low participation in medical trials.
I feel there needs to be more study done.
This Navy veteran and mother of 3 is described by family and friends as selfless. She's making it a point to participate in research studies and clinical trials available. Her blood is being collected and used for research. The plan currently in place is to remove Matthews' right kidney and any cancer found. That too will be used for medical research.
That's the only way we're gonna figure this out. We have to figure it out together. Clinical trials, any type of studies, yes, we need to be a part of those conversations.
She says it took way too many tough conversations for her voice to finally be heard, recalling doctors initially assuming she had some sort of kidney infection, and one doctor insisted the excruciating pain she experienced was muscle spasms.
I wasn't being heard, and I kept advocating for myself.
Dr. Chapman encourages patients to contact a patient advocate, a nurse navigator, or social worker if you don't feel comfortable talking to your doctor directly, or bring along a friend or family member to help speak on your behalf.
It's perfectly reasonable to advocate for yourself and leave no stone unturned.
Now faced with an uncertain future, she's determined to reflect not what's seen, but what she knows to be true.
She has a battle to fight, but with my faith, it's not my battle. It's not mine. God is my protector. He's going to heal me from the inside out.
Jessica celebrated her 49th birthday on January 25th. She'll head back to MD Anderson in Texas at the end of the month for more tests. She says the plan is to remove her right kidney with a 10% curable rate. Joel, the medical Mythbuster, is joining us on First Coast News Plus. The information he puts out to his hundreds of thousands of followers is not just changing lives, it's also saving lives. Joel, we want to thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate it. We have a lot of heavy topics to get into, but I do want to start with your 2024 highlight reel. I mean, amazing the things you were able to accomplish. You went to the White House. You had a chance to appear on the Kelly Clarkson show. I believe I saw you hanging out with Rihanna at a point, and your own TED Talk. I mean, give us some insight. What was all of that like for you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. 2024 was truly an incredible year. I don't think I could have ever imagined all the things that happened to me at all in my wildest dreams. And I think the other thing I have to say is I was doing this all while in medical school, actually still. So I'd be at my rotations in the morning and then sometimes flying out in the afternoon on a weekend to go to an event or to be hosting a different talk or a talk even sometimes. And so last year, 2024, was one for the books. But it really all began with TikTok and creating videos online that were discussing healthcare disparities and realizing that there's things that were not really talked about in my medical school that were relevant to Black and Brown communities, but weren't being discussed enough. So I'm so happy that all of this kind of came about from starting videos about 5 years ago now, and it's truly been a labor of love.
Now, back in late October of 2024, I started a series called The Untold Truth that took a look at health disparities. And we were trying to figure out the reason why it was that Black women were dying at a disproportionate rate compared to all other races and ethnicities when it comes to cancers. The things that we uncovered, so disturbing. These are issues that you cover in your social media posts. One in particular really caught my eye. Jessica Petway, you're very familiar with her story, I'm sure. Her cries for help were ignored. Ultimately, she lost her life. In your professional opinion, from your studies, what is leading to this? Why are Black women's cries for help in medical settings being ignored?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the simplest way to say it is racism. Race look different in different ways, and systemic racism is where things that we take for granted have become so embedded into a system that we don't even realize it's racism anymore. Sometimes that's believing that Black people are biologically different than any other race, leading us to believe that there's different pain levels that people can tolerate, or that there's different types of medications that should be given to one person versus another, even when sometimes we know it could be equally as effective. And so I think we really have to argue and tackle the idea that systemic racism still exists in our healthcare system. And the reason why is because where our healthcare system started was use of race. There was literature that tried to use race as a way, and race and science as a way to justify racial differences in order to justify slavery. And things like in order to keep people in terms of economics and social and political power in a specific area. When it comes to Jessica Petway's story, it's specifically about making sure that we understand how not believing Black women specifically or their pain is all a part of the same problem and can lead to, unfortunately, misdiagnoses like this in people like Jessica Petway.
You know, people are obviously treated different in life, in everyday life, right? At times, depending on race. But in a medical setting, you hope that would not be the case. Now, something that caught my eye, you actually had a twins up on one of your posts. One appeared white, the other Black. I'm a mother of twins, by the way. So the thought of my children, one lighter, one darker, being treated different, one worse, based on the color of their skin, it infuriates you. So let's talk about that, because this is a real issue. This is really happening.
Yep. Yeah, so this video I made was because I really wanted to highlight this idea that race is a social construct. I think a lot of people don't know what that means. But when a scientist says that, what we're trying to say is that you can't look at someone's genes and figure out exactly what race they are. You can know their ancestry, you can know their ethnicity. But race is something that you can't determine because often it's determined by phenotype. Whether that's skin, in some places it's by hair, it's by eye. And in this video, I pointed out how two twins, when they were born, looked phenotypically different. One presented as more white, one presented as more Black. That may not be how they self-identify, but typically people would actually identify them. But then I pointed out how in the United States, we use what's called space medicine. which means based on your self-identified race, we can treat you differently. And if one of the girls who was lighter skinned identified as white, and maybe another girl, her sister, identified as black, they would be treated differently by the healthcare system. And some examples are things like the GFR equation, which is a measure for kidney functioning and used to include race within it, or things like spirometry, which assumes that if you're black or Asian, you automatically have lower lung functioning than any other race. And these are specifically race-based equations that continue to exist in the field of medicine. But it doesn't make sense for individuals or for people that, for example, are mixed race. We don't have specific equations based on what happens with someone that's mixed race. And so race, unfortunately, is an inaccurate marker that in some ways used as a biological descriptor in medicine, even when it makes no sense, as I showed in that video.
I want to take things back just a bit, Joel, to how this all started for you, because you have darker skin, and there was a question you asked while in class. You raised your hand. If you can, share that story with us, because it's so interesting to me.
Absolutely. So I remember during my first year of medical school, I was thinking a lot about what race meant already. At my medical school, Washington State University, I was one of the first Black students. And so in all my classes, I was making sure that I saw myself represented, whether I was in my dermatology classes or beyond. In one of my courses, we were talking about cyanosis, which is when the skin turns blue. And I remember looking at myself and saying, I'm not going to turn blue. What's going to happen to me? And I raised my hand and I asked my professor, and he had a great answer. You can look at your mucous membranes, you can look at your eyes, you can even look at your nail beds. But I kept asking myself, if I hadn't asked that question in that moment, would my classmates have ever gotten that information? And all too often, communities of color are left out of the narrative in medicine. Studies show that in dermatology classes, we don't learn what skin conditions look like on darker skin tones, on lighter skin tones, meaning that we're going to get diagnosed, people that have darker skin will get diagnosed at later stages due to under-recognition, or even the fact that you can't go to Google and look up what your own skin condition looks like. So these are all problems I try to tackle through things like my Derm on Darker Skin series, where I do something as simple as pointing out, here's what a skin condition looks like on darker skin, here's what it looks like on lighter skin. And I think those have been really powerful because people will say, I have this skin condition, and I've never seen it represented anywhere before. And so I think it shows the importance of representation in medicine and really showcasing the need for it.
You know, representation definitely does matter in medicine, in life in general. And I want to talk about this briefly because something that the Untold Truth tackles is trying to encourage women, Black women, to participate in clinical and research trials. Obviously, the history of abuse is really what makes us tend to not want to be involved in these things. But without these research studies, the medical treatments can't be advanced, and that's how we're going to save lives. Is that something that you encourage as well as folks to participate in these trials?
Absolutely. Often these trials are not given to people in Black communities specifically. And so these trials can offer cutting edge research. It can give you an opportunity to get looked at. And the diversity is so clear. Even though I said that race is a social construct, that doesn't mean that race doesn't have real world impacts. And that's because we put together policies based on race, whether that's redlining, which splits people up based on where they used to live, whether that's hospitals being shut down because of segregation, and whether it's living in areas that are food deserts. All of these things unfortunately correlate with race because of the history of our country. And so by diversifying clinical trials, we make sure that we get a broad group of people who may come from different backgrounds, may live in different parts of the country, and we can make sure that the medications we have, the trials that we're giving individuals work best for everyone. But as you mentioned, it's important to understand the history of what's happened as well. And so that's why I ask everyone to do their research. Ask questions before you go into the clinical trial. Know there are options for you if you want it, but make sure you understand what it is, why it's important, and potentially ask your doctor or maybe a loved one about what they think about those specific trials as well.
Jessica Matthews, who we just heard from before you and I spoke here on First Coast News Plus, she actually has a rare kidney disease called RMC. Now, one of your videos that you posted really went into detail about not just kidney disease, but the fact that kidney donations by African Americans are treated differently than others. Can you explain that, please, as well as KDPI, that program?
Absolutely. So up until June 2024, and yes, I said 2024, kidneys that were donated by Black Americans likely to be discarded when compared to donors of any other race. And that was due to an algorithm that you just mentioned called the KDPI formula, or Kidney Donor Profile Index. It assumed that all Black people's kidneys were likely to function for a shorter amount of time than any other race. As of June 28th, 2024, the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network went back and they voted to remove race as a factor in the KDPI formula. So that potentially could have changed and decreased kidney transplant wait times for Black patients and improved overall health equity as well. And so it was really this outdated formula, and the KDPI formula looks well beyond race. But the fact that race was in there didn't make sense when we know that race doesn't have any biological function. Once again, you can look at ancestry, you can look at ethnicity. So thankfully, this equation has been taken away, and it could impact a lot of patients in terms of their wait times.
But race-based prescribing, though, that still does exist. I mean, when it comes to high blood pressure medicine, things like these assumptions are leading to deadly outcomes for African Americans. It really is something that we need to get on bullhorns and speak about. People need to pay close attention to. As I mentioned, high blood pressure, for example, we're being treated different than others, African Americans in particular.
Exactly. So what you're referring to is the fact that in medical school, we learned that the first line treatment for Black patients should be a different drug than any other race. And while in some cases, the medication you're on may be correct for whatever it is, there may be other cases where another medication may be more effective for you. But because we're automatically kind of stifling and creating these blinders for what types of medications we can give, we're not giving all the options for Black patients. And so it's really clear to understand what your options are. And one thing sometimes I tell patients is my race being used as a factor in the medical decision making that you're making right now? And I think when it comes to hypertension, it's really important to make sure that you're on the best medication. If your hypertension is being controlled with what you're on, that might be the best for you. But knowing that there are other options is really important as well.
Now, Joel, just for transparency, you are in California right now, so we're talking with you digitally pretty much. So it's breaking up just a little bit. I want you to clarify what you just said. What you want patients to ask their medical providers, again, is my race determining the medication you're giving to me? Let's say that plainly and clearly for folks to know. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself.
Exactly. One of the questions I often tell people is you can ask, is my race being used to dictate any care in my medical care right now? And oftentimes, because of how we're taught to think about race in medicine, we may be limiting the amount of care that we can give. And for example, when it comes to hypertension, limiting the types of drugs you can get. While in some cases it might be the best for you, it doesn't hurt to ask that question if your race is being taken into account.
Definitely so. I have to ask you what's in store, because you have to be proud of the work that is being done. As I said, you're not just changing lives, you're saving lives. We saw what happened in 2024 for you. What's ahead for 2025?
I'm really excited for 2025. I think while I've done so much work on social media, I'm looking beyond now. I want to really be out in person, and I'll be starting residency later this year, which I'm really excited for. But I'm also working on some really fun media projects. So I've been working on a kids show called The Doctor Is In, and it's all about inspiring the next generation of future STEM professionals. And so the premise of the show is I have an animated character with me. His name is Leland. He's a 6-year-old who loves going to the doctor. And together we talk about science concepts. We talk about how blood flows through the body. Why is it that we lose our voice? What happens when you get hungry? Really basic concepts for young kids to grasp onto. And that'll be coming out in May on YouTube on our channel, The Doctor Is In Show. I'm also working on a book right now, and that won't be probably out until 2026 or 2027, so it's a while away, but really taking all the lessons I learned in medical school, the things I didn't learn when it came to race-based medicine, putting it in a book that's a practical guide for patients to be able to use and understand their own health.
Now, Joel, I have to ask you, why is this work so important to you? Speak to the passion behind this for yourself.
This is a really personal issue for me. I think I became interested in health equity really early on, and it was my grandma who really inspired me into it. For much of my childhood, my grandma took care of my siblings and I as I was growing up, but she unfortunately passed away when I was a 7th grader when she went back to Ghana, and they told her that she she had to bring her own tubing to the hospital. And I was shocked because I didn't realize that healthcare disparities, albeit at that point it was on a global perspective, could exist in that way. And then I went through high school, went to Yale for college, and then medical school. I started doing more research here in the United States and realizing that these disparities aren't far away from us, but exist right here at home. And I just kept asking myself, why is this information that I'm learning in medical school not something that's readily available for everyone? And that's why I started posting on TikTok, posting on Instagram, really wanting to sound the alarm, as you mentioned, to the ways that unfortunately health disparities still exist, not always from implicit bias through individual racism, but through systemic racism as well. How it can be built into a system and actually perpetuated by people who don't mean to do any harm.
Joel, the medical Mythbuster, we thank you. We thank you for being here with us. We thank you for the work that you will continue to do. Of course, folks can check you out on social media. That book is on its way that you're working on, as well as this new children's programming. Again, we appreciate it, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.